Welcome to Notes from Underground. I'm Jareth Copus. Today we're going to be talking about the Ukrainian government giving the okay to idolize and memorialize the Nazi SS Galician Division. The Fourth Reich continues to march, and rewriting history is one of their first major battles. Let's make sure we put up a good fight. If you haven't already, take a quick look at the SS Galicia in my preview video that showed a great deal of photographic evidence of the connection of the Ukrainian Nationalists and their Nazi brothers. So now let's get into a brief, and I stress that point, brief history of the group, and show without an ounce of doubt that if you worship these scum, you are worshiping Nazis. In 1943, German governor of the District of Galicia, Dr. Otto Von Wachter, suggested the creation of a Waffen SS division that was made up entirely of local Galician volunteers. At first, the suggestion was ignored, but after the backing of the architect of the Holocaust and second most powerful man in Nazi Germany, Heinrich Himmler, the 14th Volunteer Division SS Galizien was announced in April of 1943. Recruitment posters, newspaper articles, radio broadcasts, and speeches were held, and Ukrainian men, a majority of whom had already been part of the OUN in its various forms, scrambled to join the ranks of the Nazis. The specifically Ukrainian aspect of this division was that it was given a very rare, special treatment not afforded to many other volunteer groups in the Nazi army. It was allowed a chaplain from the Ukrainian Catholic Church assigned to its ranks. Not only this, but the unit would not have to fight against the Allies. They were to be given the specific task of fighting the Bolsheviks. A considerable portion of those who joined the SS Galizien came specifically from the OUN-M, one of the factions of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. To simplify this quickly, the OUN split when its older members, who preferred Mussolini, and the younger members, who idolized Hitler, couldn't agree and began killing each other. The OUN-M saw this as a way to gain the upper hand in garnering the Nazis' affection and help them defeat their OUN-B foes. The OUN-B openly opposed the creation of the SS Galizien, largely for this reason, although a small amount of OUN-B members did join the SS Galizien regardless. The SS Galizien was commanded by German, Austrian, and Ukrainian officers, and obtained training from the SS Ausbildungs Battalion, commanded by SS Sturmbannführer Bernhard Bartlett, and overseen by General Walter Schimanna. A total of 81,000 men enlisted to the division, out of which 42,000 were called up for the first recruitment phase, from which 27,000 were selected as fit for military service, and a total of 13,000 were enlisted. The unit was then sent to the Brody area to partake in anti-partisan actions against the Polish and Soviets. The unit immediately faced intense combat, but maintained its composure and followed orders closely, which garnered the praise of German General Field Marshal Walter Model, who rarely voiced his pleasure to the rank and file. They encountered huge losses, which led to the necessity of rebuilding the division before it could be deployed again. It took 2 months to recruit and train new members, but immediately after the ranks were filled, they were sent to Slovakia to assist in quelling the Slovak national uprising. According to well-respected historians, it was here that the SS Galizien was assisting in anti-partisan, repressive, and terrorist actions on a large scale, and the first documentation of murder and partaking in the genocide of Jews by the SS Galizien was written. Perhaps one of the most well-known massacres involving the Ukrainian Nationalists and the SS Galizien took place in Huta Piaskowska. At the time, the village had over 1,000 inhabitants, all living in close proximity. The village was being used as a shelter for refugees, and was an active base for the Polish Communist Party. The SS Galizien had been repelled by the local peasants when they attempted to attack the town, and the massacre that followed was one of the few times the OUN-B and OUN-M worked together since the split. The SS Galicia and the Nazi-aligned UPA, composed of OUN-B members, were sent to take the town. The village was shelled by artillery until noon, when Ukrainian SS forces moved in and began herding the villagers into barns, which were then lit on fire. Some argue they had a more humane death than many others. Survivors reported the excessive abuse given to women and children during this massacre. The commander of the Polish Defense Forces unit was beaten, drenched in gasoline, and burnt alive in the main square. By the end of the day, the town was in ruins and its inhabitants nearly wiped out. 91 photos and reports surfaced of babies being killed by smashing their bodies against walls, cutting pregnant women's stomachs open and raping countless young women before killing them. The attackers then burned the village down and began to drink the liquor they had looted, singing songs and dancing in the light of the fire of the burning bodies. This was only the first documented pogrom that the SS Galizien partook in, and by the end of 1944 it was a regular task performed by its troops. Conservative numbers show that in Galicia, over 25,000 innocent lives were taken, while many other estimates double that. Actual numbers were too difficult to determine because of the scope of mutilation and burning of the victims. When the Red Army began retaking the territory, the SS Galizien retreated along with the Nazi army, being that it was part of this army. At the end of the war, many of its members were clandestinely brought to the West by the U.S. government for safekeeping, even leaving them out of the Nuremberg trials because they were deemed important in the fight against the Soviet Union, assimilating them not only into Western population, but the government and large companies of both U.S. and Canada. So here's my question to you. Do you think that a Nazi SS division, formed at the command of Heinrich Himmler, made up entirely of willing volunteers from the Ukrainian nationalist community, should be people we admire? Scum who raped and murdered in the most horrific ways you could ever imagine were only doing so to help make an independent Ukraine? The answer is clear. If you worship these scum like so many of you do, then you are no better than them. There is never an excuse for this type of action, and we can't allow people to be fooled otherwise. If you, and I'm talking directly to you, viewer, if you allow people to propagate this, then you're no better as well. It's time for you to rise and bring war to the war makers.